for this amazing story, and we want to ask that you'll open our hearts and minds now to hear what you want to have to say to us, to raise us up to be the people that you called us to be, to do mighty things in the places that you called us to go. In Jesus' name, amen. Right, let's get my bits of paper and sorted. God can't use me. I'm ... I wonder whether you've said that before. I think probably many of us have said that at different times. God can't use me. I'm too old. God can't use me. I'm too young. God can't use me. I'm not clever enough. God can't use me. I don't know my Bible well enough. God can't use me, I've got small children to look after. God can't use me because of what I've done in the past. God can't use me because I'm depressed. God can't use me because my life's in a mess. God can't use me because I'm a new Christian. We could go on. I wonder what your ... is. You see, the story of Gideon is that with God, there is no ... With God, there are no reasons why God can't use you. In fact, the opposite. That throughout the Bible, it seems that God makes a habit of using the weak, the messed up, the broken, and the unlikely. I love this piece of writing, which I came across once, which illustrates just that. It's entitled, God Cannot Use Me. The next time you feel like God can't use you, just remember, Noah was a drunk. Abraham was too old. Isaac was a daydreamer. Jacob was a liar. Leah was ugly. Joseph was abused. Moses had a stuttering problem. Gideon was afraid. Samson had long hair and was a womanizer. Rahab was a prostitute. Jeremiah and Timothy were too young. David was an adulterer and a murderer. Elijah was suicidal. Isaiah preached naked. Jonah ran from God. Naomi was a widow. Job went bankrupt. John the Baptist ate bugs. Peter denied Christ. The disciples fell asleep while praying. Martha worried about everything. The Samaritan woman was divorced more than once. Zacchaeus was too small. Paul was too religious. Timothy had an ulcer. And Lazarus was dead. God is in the business of using unlikely people. And God still uses unlikely people today. I want to introduce you to this lady. This lady is a lady from my church in Shrewsbury. She's called Vera. And when I was a curate, as I was saying earlier, when I was a curate, I had loads of time on my hands. So what I did was I went and visited lots of people on their front lines and chatted to them about what they did and took loads of video from them, and they came back and showed the church. And I'm really keen to get Peter and others doing the same. But I would share that with the church, and then one of our midweek services, which was about 10, 15 very old people generally, and Vera came up to the end of one of them and said, "Why haven't you come to me to talk to me about my front line?" And it rather took me back. Here was Vera, who's 93, I think she's probably about 96 now. And she said, "I want you to come around for a cup of tea, and I want to tell you about my front line." And Vera couldn't get out very much. In fact, virtually the only things she came out for were our midweek service and one day a week to go to a care centre called Seabury House or something like that. And she said, "That's my front line." She says, "I go once a week and I chat to the ladies there." And she said, a few years ago, when it was Easter, when it was Holy Week, someone from church gave me the leftover palm crosses, and I took them to my day centre, and I gave them out to all the old ladies and all the gentlemen there. And I had the chance to talk to some of them about the cross, and about what Jesus did, and about what Easter was all about. And she said, now every Easter, they ask me, "Are you bringing the palm crosses this Easter, this Holy Week?" And I tell them the story again. And she said, what I also have done is that we used to have a monthly lunch, where particularly some of the older lonely folk that come and a bit like a holiday home, but once a month. And she said 4 of those people at that day centre I've invited, and they now come to our monthly lunch. And she said not just that, but now 2 of them now come to church every week. That was Vera, who's 93. That was her front line, saying, I'm available, God, will you use me? Now, I must admit, when I told this story up at All Saints this morning, I just said, actually, she's a real spring chicken, isn't she? Because actually, we've got Frank up there, who's 101, who's just retired from the food bank, and we've got Megan, who's 102, who still does the prayer rota for us up there. So actually, even 93 isn't old enough. Actually, if you're 100, this can still be your story too. God uses unlikely people. And Gideon was no exception, and we're going to have a look at that story now. I'd love you to turn to Judges 6 and 7 in your Bibles. We're going to refer to some of the bits that we didn't have the chance to read to. But to give you a bit of a background on this, is that Israel was, because of their disobedience, verse 1 it says, they had done evil in the eyes of the Lord, especially worshipping other gods, worshipping other idols. Then what God did, it says, God had handed them over to the Midianites, who we're told had caused havoc and destruction. So much so that the Israelites had to hide from them. And this is where we find Gideon hiding in the winepress. Gideon was there thrashing corn, because actually they had to thrash corn in a hidden place so that the Midianites couldn't come and steal it all. And this is where God calls him. And what's Gideon's answer? What's his ... I love what it says in the NIV. The phrase used in the NIV is, he says, pardon me, Lord. I don't think he said that at all when God called him. I think he said, you've got to be joking. Who, me, God? I think that's the polite translation, probably. I think he must have said, you've got the wrong bloke. Because his ... was this. He said, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. I'm the least of the weakest, he said. That's how Gideon saw himself. That's what he thought of himself. And humanly speaking, it may well have been true. He may well have been the least of the weakest. But it's not how God saw him. For when the angel of the Lord, here in chapter 6, first greets him, what does he say? Not, the Lord is with you, O mighty least of the weakest. He says, the Lord is with you, O mighty warrior. You see, he had seen himself as the least and weakest, and yet God had seen him as a mighty warrior. God saw his potential and said, rise up, you mighty warrior. I wonder what God might want to say to us today. I wonder if many of us view ourselves in such a different way to the way that God views us. I wonder whether many of us look at ourselves and say, I'm the weakest of the least. I can't be used by God. I can't do this. When actually God looks at us differently. And God says, you are a mighty warrior. Stand up. Rise up, you mighty warrior. We are mighty warriors wherever God has placed us. In our schools, in our workplaces, in our families, in our neighbourhoods, in our voluntary work, in our leisure pursuits. There on our front lines, God has called each one of us to stand up and be the mighty warriors that he has created us to be. At our Thursday morning Men at Work life group, and if any men want to come and join us, 7:30 till about 8:35 on a Thursday morning, we have a great time. And we're now, as I said at All Saints, we're now a 2-flask life group. We have to put on a second coffee flask, because that's all we've run out. That's how much we've grown. And it's been really exciting over the last couple of weeks as we've really looked at this frontline stuff and shared our frontlines and shared stories of what God's doing and how God may use it. So this isn't just about, as we've discovered, about just having those God conversations with people. We talked particularly last Thursday about how God can use us in these places to change culture in our workplaces, particularly, to bring God's values into our workplaces, to make those places, to model godly character in those places, to live as God wants us to live and actually change the atmosphere in those places. That's so much of God's heart too. And so it's been exciting to have those conversations. If you're a bloke, come along and join us on a Thursday morning. Because this is what God's called us to. And when God calls us, as he did with Gideon, the question is, will we respond? Who, me? You can't use me. Or will we actually learn to see ourselves as God sees us? And say, even though I might not believe it, I'm going to step out and trust you. And step out into your calling. And then we go on, and it's interesting, isn't it, that in chapter 6, despite that amazing encounter that Gideon has, that he still has his doubts and his questions, doesn't he? Much like many of us, if we're honest. In chapter 6, verse 13, we see there Gideon asking God, basically, why actually is life as it is? Why actually is life so difficult for us, your chosen people? Why have you abandoned us? Why the Midianites attack us? Why are we having all this suffering? They're the questions that he comes to God with. Where are you, God? And when God calls us, we still so often have questions. We still won't understand so much. We still can't necessarily get why actually God has apparently allowed difficult stuff to happen. And then as I look around here, as I look around at Upper Saints this morning, I know some of your lives, and I know some of the difficult stuff that you guys are battling with, but you're responding to God's call anyway. And I think it's really interesting here what God does. You see, if you look what happens when Gideon says those things, God doesn't stop and answer his questions, does he? He doesn't say, well, I'll tell you why this is all suffering. This is why. He doesn't. He just leaves it hanging. And he simply says, go. Go in the strength that you have. I'm sending you. And I think there's a lesson there for many of us. Some of us will say, I need to understand this fully before I go. I need to have all my questions sorted. I need to get everything sorted in my head before I'm prepared to step out. I need to know that God's actually going to do this, and I'm going to map the future out. But the reality of it is that we're not going to understand everything. We're not going to have all our questions answered. God so often, so rarely actually shows us the whole path, and thank goodness he does it sometimes. And we have to sit with the uncertainty of our questions sometimes and go anyway and trust him and trust that he will be with us anyway. I'm forgetting my PowerPoint, aren't we? They're Gideon's questions. And then not just his questions, but then we come to his doubts, don't we? Look at chapter 6, verse 17. He says, if I have found favour, God, give me a sign that you're really talking to me. See, what we see there is Gideon's first if. And when we say if, what we mean is, actually, I've got some doubts. I've got some doubts as to whether you're going to do what you're going to say. I've got some doubts as to whether you're real. That's why Gideon's asking for a sign. And God gives him an amazing sign of the meat and the unleavened bread bursting dramatically into flames. And you'd have thought that would be a good enough sign, wouldn't you? I reckon I would have taken that as a good enough sign. But for Gideon, it wasn't good enough. Because actually, in verse 36, we see Gideon doubting again, don't we? And we have his second if. He said, if you will save Israel by my hand, then let this fleece be soaking wet and the ground dry in the morning. And it was so. And you would have thought that would have been enough, wouldn't you? But no. Gideon says, best of three, God. He says, do it again, but this time do it the other way around. Make the fleece dry and the ground wet. And this time the ground was wet and the fleece was dry. You see, despite Gideon's encounters, he still doubted. But he didn't let his doubts dominate and stop him. He offered his doubts to God and allowed God to prove himself and to confirm the way forward. Some of you have heard our story of how we got called to this place, and God really clearly showed us that Malvern and this church was where God was calling us. But still, after some of those really clear things, if Alice and I are honest, probably still we had some doubts, and that's why it took us 4 days to say yes, and why we had barren phoning us up saying, "We decided yet?" And actually we took our doubts to God and said, "Okay, you've given us these signs, but can you just confirm even more?" And you know, God did. God did in really significant ways. And I think the lesson that I learned from this is that, yeah, we still are going to have doubts when God calls us. And you know, that's all right because we're human. And actually sometimes what God calls us to do are big steps, doesn't it? It's all right to have our doubts, but what we do is we take them to God and we offer them to God. And we say, "God, I'm still not sure. Will you confirm it to me?" And I really trust that if we're open, and if God really wants us to be somewhere, that he will keep confirming it and showing us. And that is my experience over the years. So there were Gideon's questions, they were his doubts, but it's not over yet, because actually then we see his fear. In verse 25 of chapter 6, God tells Gideon to go and tear down his father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole. The Asherah pole was another object of worship to other gods. And this was really key that Gideon, when he did it, because this was the thing that was stopping Israel from worshipping God. This is what had caused all the trouble in the first place. And God said, "Go and tear them down and build an altar to God instead." But actually what we see is Gideon's scared, don't we? He's scared of his family and his townspeople, so that actually he does what God asks of him, but he does it at night, undercover. I wonder whether we relate to that. I certainly do sometimes. That we'll do stuff for God, sometimes undercover, because we're afraid. But again, we see that God is gracious, don't we? And God saves Gideon from those that wanted to kill him. He intervened so that when the next morning they found out that his altar was gone and the Asherah pole had been moved down, they worked out that it was Gideon. Actually, he was in real big trouble. His life was in danger. But actually a wise guy, God put this wisdom in this wise guy called Joash, who says, if Baal really is God, then he doesn't need defending, but he'll deal with Gideon himself if he's real, so actually we don't need to intervene. And of course Gideon was spared, because Baal isn't real. And you know, that must have been a great boost to Gideon, wasn't it? To have seen how God spared him and protected him. You see, if we offer our doubts, our fears, our questions to God, and still seek to be obedient anyway, then I think God takes our doubts and our fear and our questions and he turns them into faith. And you see, this prepares Gideon for the final challenge, which we see the lessons that Gideon has learned be put into action. He's seen how God has called him and confirmed his call. He's seen how God has protected him when he's been obedient, and now we see God fulfilling his promise of defeating the Midianites through him. You see, God had to show the Israelites that it wasn't Gideon's power or the Israelites' power that did it, but that it was God's power. And so therefore we have this amazing story that we heard read to us in chapter 7. Of how the Midianites, the Amalekites and other peoples who formed an army, as it describes in verse 12, as thick as locusts. I mean, tens of thousands of people was the army. But God chose to defeat them with just 300 men. And Gideon starts with an army of 32,000 men. But God says, this is too many. Send anyone home who's afraid. So 22,000 of them left. I think I might have done as well. And then there are 10,000 left. And he says, that's still too many. Go and actually get them by the water and see how they drink the water. And 300 of them drank the water one way, and 9,700 drank the other way. And God says, I want you to take the 300. And actually with those 300, you're going to defeat this army of tens of thousands in an amazing way. And I think what's really interesting here is that actually Gideon's response. Gideon, what we don't see here is Gideon's third if. Because actually Gideon's learned his lesson. He's learned from what God's done before that God is faithful. And that even though this seemed the most impossible thing out of all the stuff, that Gideon doesn't ask if this time. He says, okay, I trust you, God. That actually, I don't know how you're going to do it, it's impossible, but I trust that actually you're going to do this with these 300 men. And the rest, they say, is history. Go and read the story. It's an amazing story of how God did it. We haven't got time to read it today. But go and read the end of chapter 7 and just see how it was totally God that defeated that army. In a way which could only be attributed to God and not to the Israelites' power. And it reminds me of that verse in Zechariah 4:6, which says, "Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, says the Lord Almighty." And that was the reason, actually, the explanation behind that incredible victory, because Gideon was a man who had been filled with God's Spirit. If we look back at chapter 6, verse 34, it says, "The Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon." And therefore Gideon had the courage and the boldness to stand up and be the mighty warrior that God had called him to be. And I think that is the key in this passage. That's the reason why God can use everybody. That's the reason why with God there are no ... dots. Because he doesn't rely on us and our skills and our strength. But actually we do stuff because God's Spirit empowers us and equips us and sends us in God's power, not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, said the Lord. And Peter's lovely ordination yesterday, there was a line in it which really struck me, just at the point that they were commissioning these new ordinands. And the line said this, that you can't bear the weight of this calling in your own strength, but only by the grace and power of God. Pray earnestly, therefore, for the gift of the Holy Spirit. And we prayed, and there was silence, and we prayed for the Holy Spirit to fall on them. I've learned in these 2.5 years, I cannot bear the weight of this calling in my own strength. Not by a long way, but I can by God's Spirit. And whatever our calling is here, whether you're called to be what God's called you to be at work, or in your families, or in your communities, or wherever, and everyone's calling is equally valid. That's true, that we can't bear our calling on our own. We need to pray for God's Spirit to fill us and empower us. And I wonder whether this, as I close, is a particular lesson for us as a church. Today, this day which actually marks the start of something new with Peter's ministry here. As we have Eddie arriving soon, as God builds teams and ministries here, as perhaps we launch out on camp, you see, the danger is that us as a church will say, we've got it sussed. Look at the people God's brought us. Look at the skills. Look at the potential. Look at how well people can communicate. Look at what we can do. We can do this. And that's the biggest danger that we will face in the next few years. Because actually it's not by might. It's not by our own strength. It's not by our own power. But it's by God's Spirit that God is going to do stuff here. And right from day one, we need to get that straight. I need to hear that. We all need to hear that. That we need to be more than anything on our knees, praying for the Holy Spirit to fill us and lead us and equip us forward. And God's been really showing me that the last few weeks. I sort of set aside after Easter, I said, well, actually, we're not going to do any extra missions and courses and things like that this term, because actually we need to build capacity, we need to build the foundations, we need to build teams and do a lot of stuff work first. So we're not going to do any extras, and we'll just let mission go by the by a little bit. Don't tell God what to do. Because in the last few weeks, 3 people have come to faith in our churches, who a couple of months ago weren't part of our communities. And God's just brought them by the obedience of certain people here. One of them was sitting right in front of them, who had prompting from God to say, come to church. And then God's brought other people to be part of their journey. And it's been so exciting that actually when we thought mission had stopped to build the foundations, God carries on anyway. It's as if God's been saying to us, just get this. It is not your stuff, it's my stuff. and I'll do the mission. You've just got to be a deacon. And I really want us to take that forward, that as we learn to say yes to God, that we'll recognise that actually it's not by might, not by our own power, but by God's Spirit. So will we say yes to God today? Are we prepared to offer God our questions, our doubts, our fears, and step out in faith anyway? Are we prepared to seek God's kingdom first and offer ourselves openly to Him to do whatever? And that might well mean, in times ahead, laying down stuff that actually we've been doing for a long time. It might mean laying down old ministries to start new ones, if that's what God's leading us to. And we need to prayerfully discern that together. But if we're prepared to do that, then I think God can mightily use each one of us here in our communities. Why? Not because of anything that's special about us, but because He gives us His spirits and invites us to partner with Him in growing His kingdom. What's God's calling you to today? Will you put aside your ... Will you put aside your image of yourself and hear God say to you, rise up, you mighty warrior. Go in the strength that you have, not by might, not by power, but by my Spirit. I'd love to invite us all to stand. The worship team is going to come back up here. But I'm going to pray that prayer which we prayed at the ordination yesterday for each one of us, and just recount those words again. I'd just like to invite you to, if you feel comfortable about it, just standing and just being open to God meeting with you now, and speaking to you in the choir. And perhaps for some, actually, God just wants to say, actually, you've been trying to do this in your own strength. Let go and let God. Others maybe actually have been sitting there thinking, I can't do this, God can't use me, and focusing on your ... And God wants to say, I want to show you that you are a mighty warrior for me. And maybe others here, God's actually prompting them and leading them into a new calling today. So let's just pause and just be open to God. And we're reminded of those words of the ordination. You cannot bear the weight of this calling in your own strength, but only by the grace and power of God. Pray earnestly for the gift of the Holy Spirit. So we say, come Holy Spirit, come and fall on each one of us to empower us to your calling. We're going to sing the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord has anointed me now. Some of you may know it, some of you may not. And I just want to invite you to feel free to respond how you want to. I want to just invite perhaps any prayer ministers who feel able to come and pray for people up here, just to come, and we'll have some people who want someone to pray with you, pray for you. If you want to turn to someone next to you, do pray for them. If you want to go kneel at the altar, like sometimes people find really helpful, do. If you want to just sit down and be with God, do. If you want to just sing and actually make that your prayer, then do. But I really sense that God wants to fill people with His Spirit today to live in His calling. So take your doubts and your questions and your fears to God. Step out anyway and allow God to meet you this morning. Just respond however you feel appropriate. If I'm okay, this has become that would be great.